Okay, this is Q&A.
I'm working on mine all the time.
Okay.
So there's, if I understood correctly, in the orthodox world, the Jewish orthodox Jew world, there's an argument saying that the limud Torah is as important as a soldier in the battlefield. So maybe the Rav can clarify this to be more understood how to grasp this concept here.
Okay, I think you're asking to explain why in the Orthodox world we would say that someone's learning Torah is as important as the soldiers on the battlefield. To say as important as means that I can measure them, I can measure their importance and say that they're equal. I wouldn't put it that way. I would say they're both necessary. And you know, if you're missing something that's necessary, so then you're not going to succeed. So if several things are necessary, and they all are necessary, then you have to have them all. The question is which is more, but I don't think that's a useful way to put it. Well, it depends upon what your worldview is. If your worldview is that the world's existence has either no explanation or a natural explanation, and that the world's a closed system and the laws of nature are what determine everything that happens within the world, to the extent that they determine anything. Some of them could be probabilistic, like in quantum mechanics. So then you have to ask whether someone sitting and learning Torah is making any contribution at all. You don't see any connection between studying those books on the one hand and winning on the battlefield. That depends upon the worldview you're starting from. If the worldview you're starting from is that there is a creator, no, the world is not natural, ultimately, it's not accidental, it's not without explanation. Its existence is explained by the fact that there is a creator, and the creator didn't go on vacation. He's managing the world, he's running what happens in the world. Thank you very much. Then, in order to explain victory or defeat on the battlefield, you have to ask, what is the creator interested in? What does he want to accomplish by what's going on in the world? What kinds of things does he reward and what kinds of things does he punish? And that will give you your answers to what kinds of activities will play a role in determining the outcome. From our point of view, the world is not accidental, it's not purely natural. And the Kodesh Baruch Hu is interested in achieving what we are doing, especially for the Jewish people. That's what he's interested in achieving. So without this contribution, there would be no chance of winning the battle at all. With it, still, sometimes the Kodesh Baruch Hu causes us to lose. That's quite true. But without it, we would be an object of no interest to the Kodesh Baruch Hu. It would be no different from any other group. A friend of mine sent me some writing from Rav Shach, from Rav after the Yom Kippur War 40 years ago. And at that time, some people were hoping for a kind of awakening. In particular, people pointed the following out. In 1967, you had the most spectacular military victory of the entire 20th century. A 6-day victory over overwhelming odds with absolutely crushing victory. 6 years later, those very same Arab armies who were overwhelmed and destroyed by the Israeli army managed a surprise attack, which was impossible to happen. They crossed the Bar-Lev line of guns on the Suez Canal, which could not possibly happen. And they conquered the whole of the Golan, which couldn't possibly happen. And the country was in severe, I think something like 2,500 soldiers were killed in 2.5 weeks or something like that. So the question was, how do you explain that? 6 years from the most spectacular victory in the 20th century to being overwhelmed by a surprise attack and losing thousands of soldiers? How did that happen in 6 years? The hope was someone would wake up and say, maybe it isn't just guns. It isn't just bullets. It isn't just airplanes. Maybe that's not the whole story. That's the whole story. It's very hard to explain how you could go from the top to the bottom in 6 years. But Mashiach pointed out that the people who needed to hear the message didn't hear it. They drew the following conclusion. We made a terrible mistake. We weren't ready. We'll do it better next time. We're in charge. We're making things happen. It's only us. But we didn't do a good job. So next time we'll do a better job. And eventually they did fight the Arab armies to a standstill and recover the land. So I think this was my initial reaction when it happened, and now that they sent around this writing of Rav Shach, I see that I was in the same type of thought. Before October 7th, there were interviews with Israeli military people. 50 years from the Yom Kippur War. Could it happen again? No, it can't happen. It can't happen. Why not? We have the technology. We have the wall. We have the automatic machine guns. We have the sensors. We have the drones. We have spies in Gaza who are keeping track of what's going on. We have the psychology of Hamas figured out. We have the history of what they did in the last couple of years where they didn't join the Islamic Jihad, the attacks that they made. We know that they have no stomach for war. It can't happen. Can't happen. Right? Can't happen. And it happened. Tragically. Gigantically. It happened. No. Think outside the box. Try. Just try. No. Several of the leaders have said, we failed you, now we'll do it better. But it's all we. We'll do it better. We'll be smarter. We'll use hybrid warfare, which we have as a specialty. We'll wipe them out. We'll do it better. A thought, maybe it's not really in your control. A thought, maybe there's something else that's going on. I haven't seen a hint of it. I've seen a hint of it in the leaders that, not the prime minister and not the defense minister and not the top general and all the rest. Not a hint. Not a hint. Well, I think that the situation is very dangerous.
Well, I just wanted to make sure I understood you correctly. So you're saying the thought that one would expect them is to make tshuva? That's the thought?
No, I didn't say expect. I said hope. I would hope that someone would think outside the box. It happened again. Both times you said it was impossible. Both times you were dead wrong. It happened. It came out on the anniversary. How about thinking outside the box? Trying to take into account of a wider perspective. It is true that in this country there's a significant percentage of people who do believe that there is a creator and that there is divine providence. Some of them are university professors. Some of them are smarter than all the politicians put together. They're not dopes. They're not living in the Middle Ages. Maybe there's something more than you've been looking at. Maybe there's something else. I haven't heard a hint of that kind of thought. I think that's tragic. I think it's tragic and very dangerous. Now, for the divine providence to manage the war in a way that will be preserving of the safety of the Jewish people doesn't require everybody to be on the right side of things. It may not even require a majority of people to be on the right side of things. One leftist historian said, I heard him speak, he said, the promise of Zionism was no more pogroms. We have an army. We have a state. We can defend ourselves. We're not going sleep to the slaughter anymore. No, didn't protect. 1,400 people, the number keeps shifting now, 1,400 people slaughtered like sheep, just like sheep. Slaughtered in their beds, slaughtered in their safe rooms, slaughtered in their houses, slaughtered like sheep. So Zionism didn't protect it. It didn't succeed. No, so, how about thinking again? No. My hand determines the outcome. My strength, my intelligence, my bravery, my heroism determines the outcome. We made a terrible mistake, so we'll be stronger and braver and more intelligent and more courageous. You know, someone defined a fanatic as a person who, when he forgets his goal, tries harder and harder. You know, you're using the same thing over and over again, the same thing which has been shown to be unsuccessful, let alone all the inconclusive wars. And after each war, we were told we've severely compromised them, we've ruined their capacity to fight. So then 2 years later, you have another one with better rockets and better and better use. And this, that was so superbly planned, so superbly executed. So, I think the dangerous thing here is not getting the message. A message that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was sending, which certainly the message of, I'm not running the show. I have to do my part, but I'm not running the show. The religious population are people who are living the idea that we're not running the show, who are expressing it through their actions, through the sacrifices of their lives. Whatever else you say, I think the number of non-religious throughout the history of the state, the number of non-religious who have pretended to be religious to avoid the army is zero. Zero. Not one. Who would pretend to be religious so as not to be drafted into the army. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it. Give up that much of life to avoid the army. The Haredim are living in such a terrible, painful, deprived, cramped lifestyle. I would never do that. Well, if you think that that's the way they're living, then you see what they're sacrificing for what they're doing. You're not right. That's not how they're living. It's not how they experience life. But if that's what you think, then you have to realize that they are dedicated to living this idea and expressing this idea because it's a true idea. It ought to make you stop and think. It ought to make you stop and think. I know, that's the people who are studying Torah are keeping that perspective alive, that truth alive, and without that, it would be much worse, much worse.
Can I have a follow-up question? The follow-up question is about. So I understand, if I say correctly, you talk about like take more to the spiritual part rather than the practical part. But is there any hishtadlus in preparing a better army, preparing to the next war, take like to see what we did wrong?
Yeah,
part of the hishtadlus?
I said that. I said that both are necessary. You asked what contribution those who are learning Torah are making, and the point of that question is maybe the contribution is zero, and then everything is the army. And the alternative is they're also contributing. None of it meant to say that you can put down your guns and stop fighting. Nobody said that. Our Gemara says, somebody comes to kill you, kill him first. Get out in the field first and kill him first. You don't do that by saying kill him. You do that by shooting at him. So there's no question of that. But, you know, it's like, I'll tell you a story. This was Rebbetzin Sorotskin. I heard about her. She had to have a very serious operation. She was, I don't know how old she was, but she wasn't young. And it was life-threatening. And before she went into the surgery, she wanted to speak to the surgeon. So she said to him, I want you to know, I understand this is I don't know her words exactly, but this was the message. I know this is dangerous surgery, and I know that the outcome could be life and death. I want you to know that if I do die, I would not blame you, and I would not hold you responsible. And I want you to know that if I come out alive, it's because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu did it. It's not a one-way street. If I don't hold you responsible for the failure, then I don't credit you with making the success either. Because both of them are in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hands. That's the attitude of a religious person. She went in for the surgery. She didn't sit home and say Tillim. She went in for the surgery, using the best medical techniques that are available. But she understands that the surgeon, if he's successful, it's only because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted him to be successful. And that depends, in large part, who is he saving? What is he saving? What contribution will that person make and being saved, what will do, what about the people who depend upon that person, who care about that person? All of that plays a role in determining whether Kodesh Baruch Hu gives the surgeon the ability to be successful or doesn't give him the ability to be successful. The surgery is necessary. So that's not the issue. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So you see in Judaism that there's a concept that on one level, human being, man, is considered, one of the lower, less powerful creatures or creations in the universe compared to a lot of the other things that Hashem created. And on another level, that all of the universe really was created for man and to serve Hashem. When is it appropriate for someone to, or I guess more specifically for a Jew, to see himself, to be humble and see himself as a lower creature, not to think of himself big? And on another level, when is it appropriate for someone to think really that, to see the reality that the whole universe was created for us, really to serve Hashem?
Okay, lower and higher. I want to hear a little bit more. Where are you taking the idea that a human being is one of the lower, less important or less valuable creatures in the creation?
So I'm referring to the first parsha, that the order of creation, that man was the last thing that was created.
Oh, man was the last thing that was created. Let me tell you a midrash, which I think will answer that question directly. The midrash says man was created last because if he succeeds in what he's been charged to do, then we say to him, you were created into a world which was complete and ready for you. The banquet was already on the table. Everything was prepared for you. You just came in and you enjoyed it. And if he doesn't fulfill his purpose, then we say the mosquito was created before you were. So, to conceptualize it, you have a list of items, let's say 1 through 10. Sometimes number 1 is the most important item on the list, and sometimes number 10 is the most important item on the list. How would that be? Well, if I send you to the supermarket to do some shopping, I give the list and it's an ordered list. What I'm saying is, first get number 1. And then if you have more time and money left over, get 2. And if you have more time and money left, get 3. Get them in order. Maybe you'll run out of time. Maybe you'll run out of money. So this is the order of importance. And the importance decreases as you go to the bottom of the list. And 10 is the least important item on the list. But suppose instead the list is a list of instructions how to build something. And number 10 is the finishing touches which complete the job. And number 1 is gathering the raw materials. Number 2 is, mixing the paints and so forth and so on. Number 10 is the purpose of the whole list. The list is a whole list of procedures in order to get to the end, which is the purpose of the whole procedure. Then number 10 is the most important item on the list, not the least important item on the list. So this is what the Medrash says. If you're living up to what you're supposed to be, then you said it yourself, you are the purpose of creation. If you're the purpose of creation, then you are the most important thing in the creation. You are what it was all made for. If you fail to live up, so you don't end up being the purpose, then the order of creation is just an order of items, one after another. Well, if you're at the bottom of the list, you'll be the least important. But then it's not what inherently you are, it's what you do with what you are, it's what you do with your life. If you do live up to being the purpose of creation, then you will be the most important thing in the creation. So it's not as if it's a given fact that you can concentrate on this part or concentrate on that part. The question is what you make yourself into. Clear what I'm saying? Okay. Yeah.
So we're nearing the 6,000-year mark of coming of Mashiach. At the same time, we've never seen technology like we have these days. And it could be the biggest tool, and it could also be the biggest distraction. And it's only becoming bigger. So why do you think that Hashem gave us these technological advancements at the same time of the preparation of Mashiach?
So you asked almost the right person. My son is, I would say, probably the world's expert in this question. My son, I don't know if you've heard of the organization called TAG, Technology Awareness Group. You've heard of it? Okay, so he's my son. He created it. Technology challenges Ruchnius in so many different ways, and it's always changing, and it's always developing, so the challenge changes. So it requires, number one, very broad knowledge. It requires broad thinking and deep, subtle thinking, subtle appreciation for what it is and its economics and the effect on the psychology of a person and the effect on the sociological structure of the community. It has enormous, enormous implications, and they're all very challenging and very difficult. Furthermore, this is in common with other things as well, people say, well, shouldn't you consult with the people who know it best in order to know what it's like and how to deal with it? Gee, that sounds like just the simplest logic, doesn't it? But maybe the people who know it best are the most prejudiced about it. And maybe their view of it is distorted because they know it so well, because they're so heavily invested in it, because it's so important to them. And sometimes you have to step back and look at it from a broad and sometimes counter perspective to appreciate its real value. Would you think that addicts would be the greatest experts to cure addiction? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. They're failing at it after all. So, but they know it best because they're living it. So you wouldn't necessarily go to addicts to figure out a cure for addiction. I'll just give you a couple of examples of the tremendous subtlety. And the idea, the Gottleib with whom my son works have said, this is like the last great challenge before the coming of Mashiach. We have many sources that say that just before the coming of Mashiach, things are going to be terrible. The challenges are going to be awful. Mishnah in Sota says the young will despise the old, and the people will despise learning and understanding, and the place of holiness become the place of immorality, and things will be topsy-turvy. And I think we see that to a certain extent in the world that we're living in. Everybody knows about attention span. It used to be that the television picture was on the set for, let's say, a second and a half or 2 seconds before it changed, and if anything required 10 seconds of attention, it became boring and became dispirited and couldn't hold your attention. But now it's much worse because you move it. And God forbid, you press the button and the machine should take 2 seconds to respond. That's terrible. Get me a faster machine. I don't want to wait those 2 seconds. I want it right away. Number two, it becomes more and more personalized, and increases the illusion that there's something deserving of human regard there. GPT is a lion's step forward in that regard, where you type in questions and it gives you answers in the format that you would expect to get from an intelligent response, especially from a human being. So your human response to that is like programmed into you. When you see those kinds of words, you respond in a certain way. It said. It said. It thinks. It knows. Right? It figured it out. Now, you have to do a little bit of experimentation to find out that I'm using the free one, GPT 3.5. It's not only colossally stupid, but it doesn't pay attention to its own words. It doesn't record or react to its own words. First of all, I tested it on things which I know it doesn't have in its data set because I created them and I haven't published them. So I know it doesn't have a data set. And it was awful. But listen to this. Because my wife tested this also, and we have a student who also tested it. I put in this morning the following question. Why is it that women make the blessing that he created me according to his will. Okay? I wish I had the exact verbiage of the answer. So the answer is, the blessings are blessings in the morning, and they are preparation for the day, right? And the reason that a man makes the blessing that he created me according to his will. What? I asked why women are the only ones who make it, and the thing says the reason that a man makes it, doesn't know the difference between MEN and WOMEN. It itself said the reason that, now it didn't pay attention to the word that I put up, like, you know, and then it goes on to give some explanation. Just didn't pay attention to the word. I asked the following question: is the sentence, this sentence is true, true? You know, is the sentence, quotation marks, this sentence is true, end quotation marks, true? Okay, it's a trick thing in philosophy, right? I get back. This is a liar paradox. A sentence says that it's of itself that it's false, and because it says of itself it's false, it can't be true and it can't be false, and it's considered a paradox. So I write back, listen, I didn't say this sentence is false, I said this sentence is true. I get the same answer. It's a liar paradox, and so this one. I said, you didn't notice that it's not FALSE, but it's TRUE? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. You're quite right. They always apologize. Right? They put it apologize. Yeah. So I asked, is it true? And it says, it is true. So I said, really? Why? Why is it true? And the answer is, well, it says that it's true, so it's saying of itself that it's true, so it's true. So I said, really? You mean just because it says that it's true, it's got to be right? Maybe it's wrong? This doesn't even qualify as 6-year-old. No 6-year-old will make a mistake like that. I saw a computer scientist who was working with these things. She gave a TED talk, and she gave 3 examples of questions that she asked GPT-4, the latest one, right? I put 5 pieces of clothing in the sun to dry, and it took 5 hours. If I put 30 pieces of clothing in the sun to dry, how long will it take? 30 hours. I know, drying them in the sun. It's not like drying them in a drying machine. You know, it's different. The sun's there for all of them. It should have been 5 hours. No, 30 hours. I have a 12-ounce container and a 6-ounce container. And I want to measure out 6 ounces of water. What should I do? Fill the 6-ounce container with water and then pour it into the 12-ounce container. Fill the 6-ounce container again with water and pour it carefully into the 12-ounce container. And now you have 6 ounces in this 6-ounce container. It's empty! Hello! You poured it out twice. It's empty. No, now you've measured it out. There it is. There's a suspension bridge over, which is over broken glass and nails. And I want to ride my bike over the suspension bridge. Is it likely that I'll get a flat tire? Answer, yeah, because you're riding on nails over a suspension. Like, you know, this is like ABCs. I tested it on other things as well. So now, I think the big problem here is this, that sometimes it gives back answers which sound intelligent, and they sound like they're right answers. So, you might treat it as if it has some intelligence. It's called artificial intelligence, isn't it? What a stupid title. It should be artificial pseudo-intelligence. Not intelligence, because no intelligence there at all. So you'll ask it a question, you'll get an answer, you trust the answer. But I'm showing you that it can give back absolute garbage. If you ask for a full answer, giving all the reasons and then you check it yourself and read it through and check it, that might be useful, because it might pick up information you don't know, but you have to check it for its accuracy. Like when you do a Google search, you don't just take the answer off the title of the page. You read the page and decide for yourself whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense. I put this up on my blog. I found a paper where a mathematician took GPT-4 through questions of mathematics, all different kinds of questions, time and space and calendars and simple equations, so on and so on. The answers were horrible. And you have the back and forth, but it didn't say this, no, but that contradicts that. And they were really horrible. So this idea of, now you have robots in Japan which take care of the elderly. And the elderly, whose faculties are compromised, react to them as if they were human, just like people who have animals as companions. And the animals are good for the people, and the robots are good for these people. I'm not saying they shouldn't be done. But the question is how you look at them. And then there's Internet of Things. I don't know if you've heard that term, where your refrigerator keeps track of all the things in the refrigerator and tells you you're running out of butter. So, and then sometimes you program it to make the order so you don't have to look and check. And the butter comes, and and same thing. I remember this in science fiction from 60 years ago about houses that, that can talk to you, talk back, and so on and so on. It's like social media, which is supposed to connect people. They don't connect people. They divide people, because the interactions are subhuman. The interactions are so crude and so limited. I just bought Windex. See the Windex that I bought? This is how you interact with another human being. Friendship. Press the friend button. Ask that person for $5. See what you get. You're not going to get $5 from these friends. People live for the likes and dislikes on their social. They commit suicide over the dislikes. I mean, the challenge of the technology is something which is coming in at all directions. It's changing all the time, and it just undermines the whole grip of a person's spirituality. I'll just give you one more. 1.5 examples. You look something up on Google. Yeah. See? This is what Google says. So what? Google's taking it from materials that were written by other human beings. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe they're wrong. So what if Google says so? Doesn't make it right. Take any subject that you know well and look up it on Wikipedia. I did that. Often, it's very good. Sometimes it's terrible. There's something to be Scholarpedia. That's a step above Wikipedia. I looked up a field that I know quite well, the philosophy of mind. It was awful. Awful. Poorly constructed, mistakes, poor logic, poor presentation, inaccurate presentation. Because I know it well. Well, you look up something, typically it's because you don't know. So you can't evaluate. Try looking up something that you know well and see what you get. I was talking to a group of students from South Africa, and I made a remark, and somebody looked it up on Google and said, "You're not right." I said, "I am right. He's wrong. Look it up in other places. You'll find out that I'm right. I happen to know the subject." So you're giving over credibility to something which really doesn't deserve it. The idea of detached critical intelligence is something which is being undermined in very great measure. I'll tell you something which I think Socrates failed at in a certain way. I forget who said this. You have a person says, "I'm a skeptic. I don't just believe things. I want to see them proved." Okay. Are you also skeptical of your skepticism? Maybe your skepticism isn't right. Maybe your standards for proof aren't correct. Maybe you don't understand the subject or the way in which proof should be pursued, or what the variables are. Are you also skeptical of your own skepticism? Self-critique is not built in. There's no room for self-critique. You are what you are, and you get from it what you want, and everything is smooth. It's undermining the development of the human being, human mind, human sensitivity, human care for other humans in tremendous ways. I don't know the extent to which technology is the pusher for this, but I don't know if you don't have children. Maybe I've had younger siblings. You look at a 4-year-old. Why did you hit him? What's going on in his mind? What's going on in his mind is, what words can I say to avoid being punished? Not what happened. That's irrelevant. I'm dealing now with a threat of punishment. What can I do to avoid punishment? I know he hit me first. Did he hit you first? What's that got to do with it? If I say he hit me first, then I don't get punished. So I say he hit me first. There's a famous British philosopher who wrote a book called How to Do Things with Words. I don't think this is what he meant. He meant performatives, right? But this is the idea. You say words, you make sounds in order to achieve a certain outcome, right? So this is genocide, and this is cruel, and this is vicious, and this is... You're saying that to get likes on your Facebook account? You're saying that in order to be able to shout down your professor? All of that. Now, is that coming from technology to a certain extent? That 22-year-olds who you would have thought would know better have been reduced to the level of 6-year-olds. I make the sounds to get me what I want. I know I'm powerless. I can't earn a living. I know that I don't know very much, but I can shout louder than my professor. I have a megaphone, so I can shout him down. So I'm powerful. I'm powerful, because I can shout him down. That's a lot easier than reading a book, thinking about a book, understanding an idea, accumulating information, much easier. So the whole mental set that reduces the person to the crudest level, technology is playing a role in that as well. The example that my son gives is the invention of the printing press. Could anybody have dreamt what the invention of the printing press would do when it was invented? Some say the printing press created Protestant Christianity. Because when everybody has books and everybody could, so 1 out of 10 could read, right? Then the ideas are free. Everybody could know. In prior centuries, if someone could read, he became a priest. Because he became a priest, he became a spokesman for the church. And the other people couldn't read. And they couldn't have the information. And these people say, this is what it says in the holy books. This is what God wants from you. So how can you going to fight with him? All of a sudden, information became democratized. Would you think that that would change the status of world religion? You wouldn't have thought of it, but in fact it did. So I think that the technology has vast implications, and they're changing, shifting implications all the time. You know, there was an article in Ami magazine with Nehemiah, my son, maybe 4 months ago or something like that. And if you can get the back issues of Ami magazine, probably online someplace or something, and look it up. Look up because there was a very extended interview, it was like 10 pages. And it was question and answer, and he answered a lot of these things. So you get a much clearer picture if you take a look at that. Yeah.
If I follow-up question about the example that you gave about the patient that she told her surgeon that it's not his credit or discredit if the operation will be successful or failure. So my question, if God forbid, the operation wouldn't go well because a mistake that he did. So maybe even like an obvious mistake, should he be held accountable for it?
Of course, because you don't want him to commit it again, and you don't want other people to commit it. So of course you hold him accountable. The question is why he made the mistake. Why didn't he have what we would call siyata shema, so he wouldn't make the mistake? That's something else. But his making the mistake, of course he's responsible for that. Yeah.
So I have another question about a case that happened in Israel, and I just wonder how the community reacted. That's where the question comes from. So there was a disaster in the grave of one of the tzaddikim.
Yeah, meron.
It cost 45 souls.
Yeah.
So I didn't heard any investigation of why this disaster occurred, and who were responsible for it. And
There was a whole government investigation that took place. And they changed the whole structure there in order to be able to prevent these things happening in the future. There was a whole investigation.
But they didn't found the person or the few persons that are responsible for it.
There weren't any few persons who were responsible for it. There was a mass gathering. There was an area. The area was apparently certain exits were closed because of some construction that was being done and didn't get opened or something like that, and too many people went at the same time, and it got narrower, and there was a crush. This happens at football stadiums, as you know very well. This happens at crowds in cities where they're going for the train. This happens where there are big crowds of people. It happens over and over again. If you ask for the way in which we would interpret the event, from a Ruchni's point of view, that's something else. But the natural circumstances were very well investigated. And it was Mayor Porush, who's a member of the Knesset. He is in charge of Meron, and he set up all the new procedures the following year, and it was very good the following year. I mean, they specifically did that, and he's a Haredi person. Of course, it was investigated. Ja, was noch? Yeah, you have another question? No. Yeah.
So from the time of the Korban of the base of the Beit HaMikdash, and before that even, it seems that from then until now, every passing generation has been a spiritual decline in the knowledge of Torah. You know, there's been Gedolim and big rabbis in every generation. The general knowledge of the generation has been declining, and we're now at a point where the writings of 40, 50, and 70 years ago are much harder to understand, and for them, it's hard for them to understand the writings of that 30, 40, 50 years ago. How can we not only stop the decline, but also reverse it, even though it seems that some people would give up and just say, oh, Mashiach is supposed to fix it, that we don't throw our hands in the air and just give up on trying? How can we try to reverse this process, not on a mass scale, but just to ourselves in our own communities?
Well, I don't think that the fact is correct. I think that the general knowledge of the community goes up and down. Certainly was true. I don't know why you picked Dafka from the end of the Bayis Sheni, but it certainly is true. It says when Chizkiyahu was at the end of Bayis Rishon, in his generation, everyone knew all the laws of ritual purity and impurity backwards and forwards. Meaning that was true, and it wasn't true in the previous generation. It means he invested very heavily in learning of Torah. He set up guards to promote it, set penalties for violating it, and he succeeded in creating a very highly learned generation. The number of people sitting in yeshiva now may be larger than any time in the last 1900 years. The number of people full-time learning, the number that I heard when the state was first founded, there were 400 yeshiva students. That's why when someone said to Ben Gurion that you're giving up on yeshiva students for the army, you're giving up on a whole population, he said in 20 years there won't be any yeshiva students. I didn't give anything up. When I heard this story 20 years ago, they said at that time there were 40,000 yeshiva students in the country. There are many more now. The Mir Yeshiva has 10,000 students alone, one yeshiva. So the numbers of people who are learning Torah, and that means the general knowledge of Torah, is no question that it is spectacular. The idea of generally going down, of understanding the hardest works of the previous generations, that's not for the number of people. That's for the top people. Well, we do have a concept of Yeridas Hadoros, the descent of the generations. If I'm not mistaken, the Maharal traces that to the very top people. But from 99 to 98, and 98 to 97, 97 to 96 is also a descent. But 96 is pretty close to 99, pretty close. It isn't as if the whole previous literature becomes inaccessible because we've so drastically deteriorated. People are also somewhat misled about this. There's nothing in the passage of time which means that a later scholar can't challenge earlier scholars. The only exception to that is a decision in the Talmud. When the Talmud comes to a decision, we can't challenge that. That's a whole subject why that is. But other than that, the Mishnah of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the Gemara, often enough comes to a conclusion against the Mishnah. Not bound by the Mishnah. The Rambam quotes views of the Gaonim, whole generations before him, and he disagrees with them, with impunity. And there have been Acharonim, like the Gaon of Vilna, who disagreed with Rishonim. Shakas Aryeh disagreed with Rishonim because they felt that the Rishon made a mistake. So there's nothing that means that literature is inaccessible to us, or we can't appreciate that literature. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Zecher Tzaddik V'Kosh L'Bracha, knew it all. He finished it all every year. He made what he called his Siyum HaTorah, once a year, and all the Bavli, and all the Yerushalmi, and all the Shulchan Aruch, and all the Rambam. He had what he called his chovos, his obligations. He used to do that in the middle of the night, and learn for 4 hours, and he covered all of that every year. He had a procedure. You want to get an answer from him, you send him a letter in an envelope, and you write on the letter your question, and then in the letter there was also a postcard with your address on it. So he would take out the letter, take out the postcard, read the letter, write the answer, put the postcard on the pile, and go down that way, question after question after question after question. So the idea that we've lost the ability to understand, are there subtleties that need careful thought? Yes. And he was asked many subtle questions, and he had answers. Sometimes he said he didn't know. I sent the question to him through somebody else, because I wasn't, and he sent back, it seems to me there is an evidence that talks about it. And that jogged me. Remember, I knew the evidence, I'd forgotten it. I asked him why lists in the Torah are joined with vavs sometimes there's no vavs. There's one, sometimes there's two or three, sometimes they're together, sometimes they're split. What's the reason for the vavs in the various lists? And he answered, he said the evidence says, Evidence was teaching what he called pshat, and he said, there's no difference in the meaning, no matter how the vavs are. There's nothing to determine, where the vavs are. Now others disagree, but at least he remembers evidence that talks about it. So the idea that there aren't people who have grasp, he knew everything. He really knew everything there was to know. So I don't think we're lo alman Yisrael is a phrase. We're not orphans. We're not orphans. Yeah.
The question is about the view of governments, like a secular view versus a Jewish Haredi view. So so obviously democracy is not perfect, and the law, the judicial system is not perfect. But if like the secular part of Am Yisrael will give kind of the governments to the orthodox Jewish part, how would it work? How the king would be chosen? How would it work?
So first of all, I don't know, and we wouldn't choose a king. The next king is going to be the Mashiach, and Eliyahu Novi will come first, and he will announce him, and then he will be king. And then the way in which the structure, it's a three branch government. You have the king, who has his powers. You have the Sanhedrin, which is both judicial and legislative. And then you have the prophets, who have their separate legal authority. And they interact with one another, and they can criticize one another.
In today's world,
No, I mean, that's the structure of government, the way the Torah sets it up. But how much is practical to do today, and how you would administer it today? It would be a question of, it's sort of like taking a surgeon of today and putting him back 500 years and say, do surgery. What would he do? I don't think he could tell you what he would do. He has to know what the resources are. He has to know who he could talk to, what raw materials are. He'd have to adapt what he knows to those circumstances. And here, if the majority of the population is not religious, that creates a whole reality that you have to deal with in a governmental way. So I have no idea how they would deal with that. You'd have to have encyclopedic knowledge of the Torah altogether, plus a knowledge of what the real facts are. And then it would be like all other really important decisions in Torah. They're collective decisions. They're not made by individuals. People, they talk back and forth to one another. They discuss with one another. They disagree with one another. And then others join the discussion. I have no way to predict how that would be done. Okay, I don't know if I saw a very useful article today, was on, of all places, CNN, from a professor of modern warfare at West Point, who's an expert on legalities of warfare, and he wrote a comprehensive article saying that the way the Israeli Defense Forces are conducting themselves in Gaza is perfectly legitimate. It fulfills the requirements of war perfectly. Even better than what some of the criteria are. It goes further than some of the criteria. This guy is not Jewish. CNN is certainly not philo-Semitic, not at all. CNN is one of our enemies, and they published it to their credit. So if you need it for what they call in Hebrew hasbara, which is explanation, meaning propaganda. No, not propaganda. Chas v'shalom. Explaining the Jewish position and it's genocide and international law and everything else. Here's a guy who's an expert in it, and he's not Jewish, and he's at West Point, and he says what we're doing is the best that could possibly be done.
How can we find it?
CNN. I saw it on Arutz Sheva. I think Arutz Sheva brought it and quoted it. No, somebody sent it to me. Somebody sent it to me from CNN. So it's a long article where he goes through all the different criteria that are necessary, and he explains how it's done. He compares it to the Americans when they were fighting ISIS. When they took over a city, took a whole year. He says it's typical in urban warfare that 90% of the casualties are innocent civilians. 90%. He said a naive person will look at Gaza and think it was indiscriminately bombed, but that's the way it looks after it's just bombed selectively and only defensively. So he's really very, very good. The British Defense Secretary said, it was today or yesterday, Israel should stay there until it's finished. Nobody asked us when we were fighting the Nazis about bombing Dresden and killing 35,000 people in 3 days. Defenseless! Bombing them, all 35,000 to death. Nobody asked about that because we're fighting the Nazis. They asked Netanyahu, what about people who think you shouldn't be in power and you should resign and so forth and so on? What about a commission of inquiry for the mistake? When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, was there a commission of inquiry? How could they have not missed that? And where did the breakdowns come? And who should resign? Was there such a thing? No, huh? Nobody asked FDR, to excuse himself and so forth and so on, right? We have to win the war. You didn't do any differently, and we're not going to do any differently. Churchill with the Chamberlain and Churchill and all the rest. That'll come after the war.